Yeah. Tell me about Billy Hobbs.
Uh,
Because I heard Ransom Notes, and I guess this was just the fantastic the art of music where I listened to it, and I told this to Bruce that I didn't know Billy, but after listening to that song, I feel like I did.
Good, good. That's nice. Uh, I think I met Billy when I was 18 or 19, and we hung out quite a bit. Um, he was a, he was a real character. I mean, he was a musician, um, almost like a big brother figure to me in a way, and I kind of feel the same way about Bruce, although that happened, that developed more after Billy was murdered, which I think was in 2008.
I remember Billy Hobbs in the early 70s hanging on Tate Street in a black leather motorcycle jacket, jeans, and long curly black hair. We gigged on Tate Street at Elisa's Cafe, roomed together, cooked together. Billy was an excellent cook. Traveled together. We hitched to California and then on another occasion rode in Billy's ambulance home to
But
San
Billy was,
Diego to visit a
I'll just
friend.
tell you this one little anecdotal thing. I remember the first time he came over to my parents' house with me. I remember being a little bit nervous about what my parents might think because he clearly wasn't, he was a little different than my other friends. Uh, and about 20 years, well, about 15 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, my father said to me, uh, "Whatever happened to Billy Hobbs?" And I said, "Oh, he's doing okay. You know, I saw him a year or two ago, and he was doing fine." And my father said he was always my favorite. And I just remember thinking, "Wow, I would have never guessed that." Just because, uh, he didn't. Billy was different. He would.
You feel like he didn't meet the social norms
Well,
sometimes.
he just, I mean, he would. Ransom Notes kind of tells the story. I mean, when I met Billy, I think he was hopping trains. Dakota Joe, I know, would do that occasionally. They didn't live, he didn't have a 9 to 5 job. He was an itinerant musician type, but there was a lot more to him than most people, I think, thought. He was very smart and
Mm-hmm.
and into a lot of different things. Kind of a Renaissance guy, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but Bruce wrote that poem shortly after Billy's death, and when we were recording Still Looking Up at the Stars, we decided to do it. And I think the way it went down, I think the original thing we did was I just played, improvised behind Bruce while he was, um, reciting, reading a poem, speaking a poem. And then we added other instruments to it after the fact. It was quite a production. I know I must have spent 35 hours
Yeah.
putting parts together, and then we went into the studio and had bass and drums and saxophone, and a friend of mine, John Simonetti, I think played French horn and tuba and some other horn. I mean, we really spent a lot of hours. And then Jason Richmond, the producer of that album and also Soft Soap Purrings, he cleaned up my sloppy attempt at putting it together, and he made it right.
Yeah. Sometimes that happens where you put the right people in there, or
Yeah.
you put the right people together, and that helps.
Oh, I'll never produce another recording of my own because the ones that I've had other people work on are better than the ones where I try to do everything.
Oh, were you trying to do everything?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think you're just more suited to like an instrument, like
I don't want to
the
be
guitar?
distracted with technical things when I'm trying to be creative.
I got you.
Yeah, because it's even different sides of the brain.
Yeah.
I like to, when I'm playing music, ideally, I don't even want to be reading music. Ideally, I want to just be in the zone, as I've heard it said.
Yeah.
And part of that is from a lot of the music that I've been involved in the last 40 years has been jazz.
Yeah.
And a lot of jazz is improvised.
Mm-hmm.
I've done a lot of small group jazz in particular. So, I like, my favorite situations are when the music is kind of loose and you can go off.
Yeah, I could tell it in the way you, hearing your albums and the way you play.
And that's the thing about Bruce that's really interesting to me, because Bruce, when I met Bruce, he was a folk singer,
Mm-hmm.
and he is a folk singer.
Mm-hmm.
But there's this other side to Bruce, and I think that we brought it out maybe a little bit more on some of the things that Jason and I, recorded with him, and the other musicians who were on those records. Bruce, he has I know he enjoys jazz. I know he listens to jazz. And Bruce he's an improviser too. I mean, you've heard his poems, right?
Mm-hmm.
The poems, like on Still Looking Up at the Stars, we recorded two poems, and I love that stuff. We did Hucksters
Mm-hmm.
and For Marvin.
Well, Marv, they tell me you passed on, old man. So I have to think of those days and all those long nights, picking at the wick with Scotty and the boys, and you walking the boards behind the bar and the place really jumping, and Bob squeezed into a booth with 6 people.
And they're both, and actually in particular For Marvin, he's talking about Greensboro. He's talking about people in Greensboro.
Mm-hmm.
Marvin was Marvin Craig, I think was his last name, and he was the owner of the Pigwit. He was always behind the bar. And Bruce is referencing people in that.
Chain smoking, talking baseball with plumbers and ballet with schoolgirls from the college. Blue Eyes on the juke and old Fred singing in the rain with a handful of small change. Hey, Bub, I got enough for us to get a beer. Where did those days go? Where did you go?
So the way that was recorded, we were in the studio. I happened to have, it was a drummer, Bobby Cohen. Let's see, I think it was probably John Simonetti on bass and Dave Finucane on tenor saxophone. And we basically, Bruce started to read the poem, and we just started improvising. And it was one take. And what you hear on the record is what we did. And I remember listening back to it going, yeah, that's finished. No need to do another one.
Right.
I can't find the funny papers in the news, and there's a suds and duds, computers everywhere, and Coleman is tending bar across the street at Logan instead of with you. Because Beeler went off to grad school in Indiana or somewhere, and it's all oral history. And you and I and Dixie and Del Rey are sipping buds on bar stools. Pool bars are cracking, and you're telling me to stay away from the cigarettes, but to go on and drink my beer and have my fun. Harry said you were up on the corner for days before you flew the coop, and you mentioned my dad. I know you loved him, and I'll tell him so when I write, although he wasn't as big as you said he was. But you were pretty big when the Darkling came hunting up Walker Avenue. Remember when I was staying at the Sally? Had run away to be a picker, and you told me how you'd seen them drugs sneak up on a lot of kids. Well, tonight, I'm just drinking weekend beers, and I'll lift this Guinness to you.
So that's very different from some of the other music that I've played with Bruce, where, they're like, some of the songs are like traditional folk song forms, like something Bob Dylan or Woody Guthrie would do. And I've been asked on more than one occasion, why do you enjoy playing with Bruce so much? There's not very many chords. You're used to playing music that has more chords. And
a lot of variation.
More complicated,
yeah.
and actually there is a lot of variety in Bruce's music.
Mm-hmm.
But I said to the person, "Have you ever listened to the words?" You know, that's why I like playing.
The Don Quixote side of me is stealing once again to the maelstrom of another dream. As she bends the clouds above my head, stir a dying flame.
Playing with him. I started to figure out from all the gigs I did with Bruce, I started paying more and more attention to the lyrics and realizing that, you know, that I wanted to frame the lyric with the proper chord or sound. It's just because the chord might have been G doesn't mean I'm just going to play a grip for G, you know, one of the traditional voicings that guitar players play. I mean, sometimes I might just play an open G chord and it would be perfect, but sometimes it would, to me, it would require something else. So I really like, I like listening to the words and kind of coloring. Does that make sense?
Yeah, filling in the blank.
Yeah,
It's almost
yeah.
like you have a like a sketch drawing, and it's, you know, when somebody draws, they usually take a pencil and, you know, maybe draw a sketch of whatever it is that their person or whatever, and it's like the two of you are kind of filling in the background with a little bit here and a little bit there.
And there were even, you know, like when I go back and listen to some of the stuff that we have done, I realize that sometimes I'm kind of playing these little melodic lines behind him while he's singing, and it's almost like I'm a background singer, you know, singing a harmony part. But, you know, as a mutual friend of Bruce and I think it was Rob Slater, said, he said to me, you know, and I think he said something like, you know, Bruce gives you a lot of room to work, gives you a lot of space to work. And that's the thing, Bruce was, he's always been very happy to kind of just let me do my thing. And I try to stay out of his way.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, going back to, you know, now that you mentioned that, going back to, I was going to say still looking up at the stars, but the ransom notes on Billy Hobbs, I mean, the music there is like, it's almost its own character, especially when he pauses in between, I guess, the two verses, and there's this
and there's
long,
like jazz kind of
yeah,
thing. Yeah,
and that's a very, like, I'm a big Bruce Springsteen fan, you know, and it's like, I was trying to think of Jungle Land, or I was trying to think of the other song, but there's this long interlude, and you know.
So you just reminded me, that whole interlude part in the middle was recorded after all the spoken word stuff was done, and then we put it together. So that came after we had the other parts. That gets pretty intense, as I recall.
Yeah, and it's almost like you're traveling the life of Billy right there. going through, he talks about the portion of Mexico and chasing down the purse snatcher, and it's almost like you're riding the wave of Billy Hobbs.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I remember the first time I heard it. It kind of made me. I felt a lot of emotion, but it made me smile and kind of laugh because, that's the thing about Greensboro. A lot of the people I know in Greensboro are, and I'm one of them too. I know a lot of characters. People use the expression, "He's a real character," or he's an original. And it seems like, you'd just be walking down Tate Street and going to the Hong Kong house, and there are all these really interesting characters.
So it's what gives it life, doesn't it? It's what makes
Yeah.
it's what makes life interesting.